We answered a lot of these questions just through our general correspondence just now, but the big thing that I know about the group in front of me is that you guys can do it all in a lot of ways. I'm fortunate enough to be married to a farmer, and I know that some days he's a vet, and some days he's an electrician, and some days he's a plumber and a contractor and everything else. And so a big thing that we thought would be important as part of our presentation today is not just tell you about what Green Iowa can do or what it has done, but in a lot of ways give you an idea of the basic measures that we implement, the materials that we use, so that in many ways you can make some of these improvements yourself as needed if you do find the time and do have these sort of efficiency measures that you want to upgrade. However, we want to make sure that you have a pretty good understanding of the process that we go through and the major areas of concern. So talking first and foremost, and we talked about it a little bit already, is with safety. That's the biggest thing. I can't emphasize that enough. We have a lot of people that want to go in and just weatherize their own home. They think it's super easy, but you have no idea if your home is already too tight to maybe have some of these efficiency or air infiltration measures put in. So we want to make sure that you're not, dealing with radon, or you're dealing with a gas leak or something like that. And a lot of times just that clipboard audit from your utility company can provide you with some of that basis information, whether you need more insulation or if all of your appliances are combusting correctly, operating properly. We talked a little bit already about improper fixes or the basement and the fridge dilemma. A lot of our work does become consultation and giving suggestions about how people can save money, save energy, basic things that you can do that you maybe just had no idea that there were different programs available. So we talked a little bit about all of this already, and I don't need to go into it too much further, I don't think. But again, a big part of our audit process is safety and analytics, and so your Green Iowa team can come out and provide this. A lot of times, your utility will have a clipboard audit that doesn't include a blower door, but you can usually get one upon request. Sometimes that does require a charge. I don't know specifically, sometimes it's like $100. Otherwise, they usually just have a free energy audit that's available to you. So that's a good place to start if you're looking to do a lot of this work yourself. Make sure that you know exactly what you're working with. I talked a little bit about this, but sort of to break it down very simply in this, elementary drawing of a house. The biggest thing is improving your thermal envelope. So you want to just make sure that what you're heating up is staying in your house. And any time that you've got bypasses, windows, doors, attic, basement, all of those are key areas where you could be losing that heat that you're paying to heat up each day. And certainly we know in our harsh Midwest winters, it's really hard some days to keep that air that you're heating up inside your house. So the major focus of our work is looking at this space and identifying exactly what you're trying to heat up, what you're trying to keep cool, and then doing our best to make sure that that happens.
Ashley, could I ask you, if you're going to be going through their house, would you have any suggestions as to where they should start or what that process would look like?
Yeah, the biggest suggestion that I can make, and then when we approach large houses, we run into those same, gigantic 4-square houses or really old homes that, you're only going to be able to do so much work. Start with your basement and your attic. Those are the two key places that typically have the most air infiltration issues. Places like an attic access, or you probably have the walk-up stair attics, depending on how old your house is and the type that it is. And in your basement, a lot of times you could spend, our team of 5 members could go into a house, gigantic 4-square, and caulk around every window and door in that house and have the same amount of impact as just addressing an attic access that's really, really leaky, or a basement that has maybe, there used to be an old pipe coming out of the basement and then they upgraded their system and somebody just left that hole there. A lot of things like that are places to look. Another thing that is important to know is the type of house that you have. So you've got basically 2 kinds, a platform and a balloon frame. And if you're living in a big old, turn-of-the-century house, you're probably in a balloon frame, which means your wall cavities go from basement to ceiling, right? And so inside your walls, that means if there's cold air in your basement or there's cold air in your attic, all it's doing is funneling up and down your wall cavity. And that cold air is coming out around doors, around outlets, all sorts of places where you'd never think of having cold air issues, right? Interior walls, that doesn't make any sense. But if you have a balloon frame house, that's certainly what's happening. So when we encounter houses like that, we know that we have to do work on the outside walls as much as the inside walls. If you have a platform house, which means one platform sitting on top of another platform, that air barrier stops at each platform, and they just stopped building houses balloon style because of, one, the fire, the fire hazard that was created by that large wall cavity and just the access to lumber. So basic things like that are important.
What do you usually do to provide insulation in those cases with the balloon houses?
Sure. Typically what we do is, same sort of measures take place in each house in regards to insulating, outlet insulators or caulking around windows, caulking around doors, insulating attic hatches. We use a lot of different materials that I'll go through here in a second. But the big thing is you don't want to be in a platform house and wasting all your time insulating interior walls that don't have anything to do with your inefficiency, or just focusing on outside walls and really you've got gigantic air issues in your basement that are just funneling up through your wall cavities. So really looking at your house with a fine-tooth comb, it is going to be important because, as Martha said, that's what our group comes in and does. It knows where to look. And so start with your basement, start with your attic. Those are two really key places to have your focus. Awesome. And this is a really great picture. And I don't know if everybody can see it all right, but this shows you exactly what kind of issues you're facing. So you can see where exactly all of that air that you're heating up is escaping, maybe out of your attic access, out of your basement, and where all this cold air is constantly trying to get into your house, around windows, around doors, all the areas where you basically, at some point when building it, cut a big hole in it, right? And so if you don't have people who are installing windows correctly, installing doors correctly, that creates room for air infiltration to take place. So now we're going to talk a little bit about common materials, and some of these may be second nature to all of you guys, and you're using them all the time, and this is very much review. But a lot of times that's the big question. It's like, okay, well, I know I need to address this. What exactly am I supposed to go to the store and buy? And all these materials can be found at your local hardware store, so as simple as Hardware Hank to Lowe's, Home Depot, Menards, they should all carry these. And these are all items that we use to address air infiltration issues. Probably the one that we use most often is the one you're seeing up here in the corner, which is spray foam, expanding spray foam. Has anyone used this before? Pretty common material. Yep, it's going to be spraying a little and expands a lot. It's great. It's water resistant, and it creates basically an air barrier where nothing's leaking through. When you think of fiberglass insulation, which we see a lot of people have, though it's great for some insulation, in some ways it's just a glorified air filter. That air is eventually still getting through all of that fiberglass. So if you can create an air barrier so that it's dead air on the other side of wherever you're insulating, that's ideal. So that material there is a great opportunity to create air barriers. Familiar with just basic silicone caulk, we use that around windows, around doors. Make sure that you're getting clear if you're going to do it around the trim inside your house and not bright white, because that's always something that we're double checking. And again, you can buy this by the case at any of your local hardware stores. It's great if you've had windows that have been installed and maybe they haven't insulated like they should around the trim of your window. We get into houses and we run blower doors and we see windows that are blowing curtains, because people haven't retrofitted their windows correctly. So this is a great way to seal up those problem areas. Rigid foam board, which is what we used in Martha's chicken coop, again, creates an air barrier. That's the best kind. The pink, the blue, which you guys are probably familiar with, you've seen before, it works great, but I wouldn't put it in a living space. Very toxic and flammable. So we don't put it in anyone's basement or anything that we wouldn't want to catch fire and have issues with. So that's a great kind. You can get in the big sheets at any of your local hardware stores. And then weather stripping, outlet insulators, door sweeps, all other regular materials that we use as part of our weatherization process. The other thing that I will encourage you to use, and a lot of times people just think they're for babies, it's the outlet plugs. So especially if you have a balloon frame house and you've got all those interior walls, you'll not believe when we run a blower door test how much air comes out of those outlets, because you remember there's a big hole behind there. And if you put these stoppers in there, it's a great way to stop all of that airflow and insulate those outlets. So and there's just some pictures of our member at work. One great example, if you have an attic access, which we deal with quite a bit and are usually very leaky, especially if it's not a walk-up, if it's just a basic attic access, what we'll typically do, we'll we'll put basically foam tape around the top, and we'll put insulated hard rigid foam, and then we'll weigh it down with a brick. Notice that we've cut a hole for the brick so that you're not leaving a brick on top of attic access for the person that comes after you. But what that does is it presses it down and it creates a tighter seal. So sometimes it's just being a problem solver in instances like that. Those are just basic options that you can do to make your home more energy efficient. And then efficiency, which is another big thing, and really where you're going to see a lot of your payback realistically. A big transition to CFLs, LED lights. It's certainly where everyone is headed. I just had a call last week about trying to order 4,000 LED lights at a certain price for our team for next year. They're certainly where you're going to get your payback, and I know a lot of times people are like, oh my gosh, they're so expensive. Literally, they're the only way that you're going to get your money back in comparison to an incandescent. An incandescent does a better job of heating a space than lighting a space. They're not efficient whatsoever. So, especially if you've got major operations, like a dairy farm or something where you're using a ton of lighting, it is certainly worth it to invest in efficient lighting. And there's a lot of rebates available through your utilities and other programs like Department of Energy that are going to help provide some of that payback for you. A lot of rebate incentives are in place. You're also looking at low flow fixtures, which are common that we implement, obviously just basic water savings, and then also HVAC tape. So anytime you're taping your ducts, we do that quite a bit. We run into a lot of duct tape, not the appropriate use for duct tape, even though it is called duct tape and you're trying to put it on your ducts. Okay, so this metal HVAC tape is what you'd want to use. And those are just some basic ways that we're looking at efficiency and really basic stuff that you guys can do. Lighting, low flows, those are all things that an average person can implement.
How are the LEDs in cold weather? Are there cold weather ones like the?
I would certainly check into it. There are options available, and CFLs have come a long way in that too, for basically outside lighting. Certainly in the early going, CFLs had some learning obstacles where the lighting was off and they hardly worked outside. So you certainly want to make sure if you're going to have it outdoor versus indoor, there are a ton of options available, but make sure that you have the right one for your needs so that.
But there is a difference on the LEDs too. There's
Yep.
So what are the hazards of the LEDs and the CFLs?
The question is, what are the hazards of the LEDs and the CFLs?
In comparison to incandescent, are you talking about mercury? So a lot of times people are concerned with the disposal. And the biggest thing is just disposal of those lights, making sure that you're taking them to your local waste agency. If they break, the amount of mercury, which is usually the biggest thing that we hear, there's a lot of mercury. It really isn't an issue. Realistic, if you eat like tuna a few times a year, that's going to be the same amount of mercury exposure as you would have to dealing with a CFL light bulb. So there's not a ton of safety issues in regards to LEDs and CFLs. And certainly as they progress and people are finding out more and more about them, it's basically a non-issue. So disposal is the biggest thing, making sure that you're just taking them to your appropriate waste management site.
I think it's a mistake to think about CFLs and LEDs in the same terms. Because there's no mercury in the LEDs.
Right, just CFLs.
Just the CFLs, and I'm a little more worried about it than you are. I would take them to a special disposal place. And the other thing is, I don't think you have a problem with LEDs in cold weather.
Right. So I guess I'm not delineating the two enough. So CFLs are what have mercury. LED is not. Whatever your local waste management facility is, each one's different. Some have sites that specifically take CFLs if they're broken. Some you may have to send in to a specific manufacturer. So it does vary from where you're at and what you have available to you.
I had a question on the CFLs. We have those in our house, and they don't last very long at our place on a farm. And I'm wondering if we're getting some power surges or what's sometimes they only last 6 months. So we just decided to quit buying those and to go with the LEDs. But would the LEDs have the same problem, you think, with power surges? Or? I
can't speak to it, I guess, in an informed you know, at your location and what's causing those, depending on if it was the type of CFL that you purchased. I'm glad to see that you went to LEDs instead of back to incandescents. That makes me happy. And I can't speak, LEDs are still relatively new. You know, I think that they are, in all honesty, going to encounter some obstacles. But I think that, you know, they're continuing to improve and can just continue to be informed about what you're purchasing. And I think if you do know sort of the life expectancy of the material that you're getting and you're not seeing those results, to certainly follow up with your manufacturer and things of that nature. So we haven't been implementing LEDs as regularly as we have CFLs. We haven't had a ton of feedback that they aren't lasting long or that, you know, LEDs have encountered the same issues. It'll be interesting moving forward in the next, you know, 2 to 3 years to see what kind of strides are made and see if they're encountering the same sort of challenges. So I know that doesn't completely answer your question, but that's as much as informative information as I can give you.
Ashley, I have a question. I'm curious, do you know why you would use this tape versus duct tape? Why duct tape is not as effective
duct tape,
or as good?
Yeah, though some people think you can solve all problems with WD-40 and duct tape, right? The duct tape is just not meant to withstand the heat that's coming through your ducts. So this is meant specifically to deal with high temperatures. And so if you put duct tape around it, all it's really going to do is melt at some point. Depending on if you're using metal piping or metal. Can't think of my word right now. Yeah, but duct tape just isn't the right material for the job. You can get this at any of your local hardware store. Sometimes it's called electrical tape, HVAC tape, are common names for it. Again, just some implementation here. You can see what we're talking about with using that HVAC tape on ducts. Also adding insulation to piping and then changing a low flow fixture. The most important thing about these measures, especially in basements, is identifying if you're trying to heat your basement or not. So if it's a finished basement, it's one that you're trying to heat up regularly, these measures aren't really necessary, right? Because if there's heat coming off of these pipes, all it's really doing is going into the space that you're already trying to heat, right? But if your basement isn't something that you're trying to heat, that's when these measures become important. So always keeping in mind the space that you're trying to heat and the space that you're not trying to heat, so that you can identify exactly where you should be providing work. Same thing with your attic, right? If you're trying to heat your attic, which in most cases you wouldn't be, you want your attic to be basically the same temperature as the outside, your insulation would go on the floor of your attic, not the peaks of your attic, because you're not trying to heat that space. So a lot of times you run into things like that, where people just got a little turned around with what they're trying to heat or cool down, and implementing and paying a lot of money to implement things in the wrong places. That's a big part of what we do, just connecting you with resources that maybe we don't have, or it's not our skill set. We're making sure that you're aware of rebates that are available. That's a really big piece of what we do. You know, if you get a high efficiency furnace, you could have this tax write-off, or you can get this rebate from your local utility. Those are always options. And then again, utility services. And then a lot of times talking to people about behavior changes. You know, that realistically, if you're taking this sort of different action in your house, it can do a lot to save you money on your utility bills outside of doing some major changes or implementing a ton of new material. So benefits, I think some of these are pretty intuitive. Obviously, energy savings is going to be one, and obviously dollar savings is another big reason why all of you are in here. We really think that between energy savings, dollar savings, and comfort, that's how we get a lot of the people that come to our program. So we say cost, conservation, or comfort. Hopefully between one of those, we've got you reeled in. And obviously any money that you can save on energy efficiency, really money that you're not even thinking about wasting, can then go towards other projects, whether it's equipment or seed or feed or what other major needs your property has.